People have already been killed over this, so when we show up, are we going to be possibly killed because we're trying to uncover the story? Like, what can happen to us when we go there, you know?
I mean, look, this is what I'll say. Truly, like, the main thing I want to get across with this film is not what we did. It's about highlighting the bravery of the journalists, the law enforcement officials, the politicians in Malaysia who really spoke truth to power, and they paid the consequences, right? They were the ones who were threatened. People have been murdered over this, right? I don't think we have anything to fear because we're just telling other people's stories. We're trying to highlight the journalistic excellence that already exists that not enough people know about. So, you know, it's not something I really think about. I'm Cassius Michael Kim. I'm a director-producer.
My name's Joe Simon. I'm a cinematographer.
The film is called Man on the Run, and it's the story of the 1MDB financial scandal out of Malaysia, one of the largest financial scandals in modern history, where this gentleman named Jho Low, with the help of a vast network of co-conspirators, stole between $4 and $7 billion from the people of Malaysia and frittered it away on a luxury lifestyle, a $250 million super yacht, partying with celebrities. They financed the movie The Wolf of Wall Street and pretty much got away with it for a very long time. And the main criminal, Jho Low, is still on the run and has evaded capture for many years. I think growing up, you know, there wasn't a lot to do in my town, so my friends and I would always go to the movies. Artistically, I started out in music, but the older I got, it just seemed more feasible to have a career with a little more steady line of income, and filmmaking was kind of what I fell into. I think my first job out of college was at an independent film company. At the end of the day, I want to have something I've made for all the hours we spend doing these things we do, and whether it's film or music or whatever, it's just nice to have something you can point to as like, this is what I've created.
In the late 90s, I was a professional BMX rider. Part of the necessity of riding bikes was filming yourself. I picked up a camera at Best Buy. I got a job at Best Buy and then got a sweet discount on a Digital 8 camera, if anybody even remembers what that is. I basically started filming myself and my friends. That turned into making full-length DVDs for the BMX world. So that's kind of how I got into it, and I was really very documentary based, and from there I just kind of kept moving forward and doing commercials and then narratives and everything else.
I think my favorite kind of films are films that kind of break the borders of and boundaries of genre. You know, real life isn't just one type of thing, it's all kinds of things. And whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I think something that kind of replicates that human experience is what I'm really drawn to emotionally.
I really like darker films. I like dark comedies, I like thrillers, I like some horror films. So I really lean into that world of filmmaking, especially like this documentary being kind of like a crime thriller, heist thriller kind of film, and really was drawn to that. So I think I'm definitely, that's the world I always dive into.
I think the craziest thing is I was tangentially aware of the story just through, you know, being a journalist and documentary filmmaker. You hear about these crazy stories, but what really kind of made me wonder is like, how come this didn't have a bigger presence in like the cultural zeitgeist? How come people didn't know about it? So few people have been held accountable. And I think as a filmmaker, those are the perfect ingredients for this kind of film, to make sure you can shine a light on this terrible injustice that happened and inform and educate people about why it happened and how we might be able to prevent it from happening again.
Cass reached out to me saying, I have this project that just come up and do you want to be a part of it? I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And we needed to create a proof of concept basically to get a green light and funding for the film. So we went to New York and shot over a couple days to a week. I can't remember how long exactly it was.
3-4 days?
Yeah. And made a 10-minute proof of concept to then sell the investors on making the full film. And so that's kind of like how it started. And so from there we really dove into the look and feel and how we would create the film from that point. But that's kind of the beginning stages of it.
When the whole pitch came to me and we were developing the deck, we were actually shooting something else in Montana, and it just felt like with the scope of the production, but the shorthand we have for being in crazy situations in different countries, this came very useful, especially for this project, so it's a natural fit. When making nonfiction content, I think I've always tried to bring like a cinematic approach to real life. Like 15 years ago, that I was using 5Ds when it came out, and was shooting nonfiction, like shooting, producing for networks and telling interesting stories. As we get longer and longer form content and more money to play with, then we try to up our game a little bit. Joe's always on top of like the best technology and the best filmmaking techniques that evolve, and so we try to implement those kind of techniques into nonfiction filmmaking.
Being that it's multi-country film, we were looking at like, okay, how do we create a visual language that'll help tell the story of these different locales? And so going into that, we knew we had some big cities like New York and LA would be a part of it. And then we'd also be going to Malaysia. And so we started piecing together, like, what should each of these places feel like? And so to us, it's like, okay, New York, it's like the big financial hub. That's like where a lot of the behind the scenes work was happening for this financial scandal. And also in London, that was happening with some people there. So like, okay, we'll put together everything we're shooting in these locations is gimbal, to be very smooth in how it moves. That way it makes more sense for these big cities in the way that you would find that. And then being in Malaysia, it's like, let's shoot all handheld in those spaces to be more gritty, be more authentic with the people that are there and the way people live. And then within that too, just like the colors, like when you think of New York or London, it's like leaning more into the blues in those worlds, and then in Malaysia leaning more into the oranges there. And then even beyond that, it's like talking about the interviews, like how do we want these interviews to look, especially with the framing, having a mix of long and short side framing, which will help us to help push a character's emotional intent, depending on what they're saying. If we're short side framing, then we can help it feel a little more tense and make the audience react differently versus long side framing. So, we started diving into lots of different references, looking at different heist movies and tons of different places that we got that inspiration from, and started building just a catalog of those, just kind of discussing it and landing on the final look. We ended up on the Alexa Mini. I love Alexas in general. They have a really great rendition of skin tone. They have great dynamic range. It just has a overall texture, feels more filmic to me. So I think for a story like this, just to help elevate a documentary and make it as most organic as we could, it seemed like the right choice.
For many years, as we talk about different projects that are going to come up, anamorphic has always been kind of at the forefront of the conversation. Whether it's narrative or nonfiction, I think the look of the anamorphics kind of lends itself to the visual language that we're trying to impart into the work. As Joe mentioned, just having like that wider field of view, I think it just gives you more options, especially if you're shooting so many interviews, but also trying to cut the interviews in with B-roll and MOS interviews with people. It just gives you a more interesting visual dynamic.
And I think just cinematically, the depth of field you get from anamorphic is a lot more, and it just has the compression to the background, the bokeh you get. It's like all those elements just make it feel more cinematic to me. I'm a big fan of anamorphic, and I think it just pushes the level of production higher than what it would have been with spherical as well. So there's a lot of different elements of why we chose it. We didn't, unfortunately, have a lot of lens testing time. I luckily had shot on the original Ryans quite a few times. So I know the look, I know the feel of it. We definitely didn't want a vintage anamorphic lens because we didn't want anything that had too much character, too much fall off, because we wanted to make sure that things would be in focus and we'd have the sharpness we needed there. So that brought us to the Atlas line. So we did shoot the proof of concept on the original Orions, but then the silvers came out and I was like, this is going to be better, because as much as I like the Orions, the silver's giving you the flare that is the same color as a light source is something that I love.
Especially because the proof of concept took place in New York, but the full production would take place, in London, New York, LA, and Malaysia. So having the silvers, I think, just added more character to the way we were able to depict these more foreign environments and just made the whole film look a little more interesting.
So basically for the interviews, we had two sets. We had a wide, like a really as wide as we could get, because the idea was you want to see the environment the character's in, because that environment's telling you about this character and who they are. And so for us, it was connecting those two pieces. So we used the 40 or the 50 for our wide and try to show almost full length as much as we could with that. And then we'd have a tighter one, which would be 65 or 80, sometimes 100. We still want to see the eyes. Don't want to be too profile. I want to see into their eyes, be able to and get that emotion from them, but it'd be more sidey. And so we used those lenses a lot.
We had scheduled, I think, 35 days of shooting spread across about 4 months. We had a rough start to it just in terms of we stacked London, New York, DC together, and then we had 10 days before we went to Malaysia for 3 weeks.
Cassius was directing, and then we had a producer on set with us. And then I had a dedicated first AC that flew everywhere with us for the most part. From there, we get local crew at each location. And if we were doing interviews, we'd have usually a 2-person genie team. So we have a gaffer and a key grip.
Sometimes a second producer, depending on location.
Yeah.
So not that big.
Yeah.
10, 12.
Yeah. And then sometimes when we go to do more of the verite kind of shooting, we strip it down. We wouldn't have any genies. Just we're going out, using natural light. We're going to run around, just capture things as we needed to keep a smaller footprint. He got COVID. The rest of us were testing negative, so he was remote directing for one of the days, and the next day I was positive with COVID. So then we were both remote at the same table on our laptops, like I'm trying to our AC/camera op was then now setting everything up with the G&E team, and I'm on just on Zoom directing everything for lighting and trying to get it all figured out with frames for that day. And then after that, I think he got COVID, so then the production was done.
No, but we still had an interview. So I think the last interview we shot, it had to be single camera because we're like, there's no way we can set up 2 cameras with all of us having COVID. So at that point, it was the second AC and the producer just setting everything up with the G&E team at the Masonic Temple in DC, and just we pulled it off though, and all the interviews are in there, and they look pretty nice. Yeah. I think the bookings we got were very important to telling the story. There's a lot of people who wouldn't speak because of their complicity or because they don't want to look bad, of course. And I think those people get a shout out themselves in the film. But the people we did manage to get on camera, we were able to get some exclusives with these FBI agents who were very instrumental in funneling information from Malaysia to the United States once the government there was cracking down on the internal investigations happening. So there were people who had never spoken to press before, and that took months of just negotiating and developing relationships. They interviewed the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, who is now in prison. It was his last sit-down interview before he went to prison. I think there's really only one way to approach it, and that's just to be transparent with what you're doing, not just about the interview, but about the film you're trying to make. Assure them that you're trying to tell the story the way it's meant to be told. Now, we all might have different ideas on what that might be. The more difficult aspect of it was trying to persuade some of the people who were implicated. And they have their own reasons for saying yes or no. I know a lot of times there were people who wanted to speak, but the government would not let them because they're in the middle of sentencing or in the middle of trial. There are a lot of moving parts to this. With the Prime Minister, it started with just reaching out to his family. I was able to get the contact information for a member of his family. And it's about treating people with respect, whether or not, how you feel about what they may or may not have done, right? Like you treat them like anyone else, and you assure them that this story can't be told without them, and that's true. And that's all I have to offer. And that was the same for the FBI agents who had never spoken to press before. I think it really helped that we had already met their colleagues who were some of our first interviews for the proof of concept, and they were able to develop a level of trust in what we're doing and the way we'll treat their story. And I think that's a sacred bond.
I love shooting recreations, and so I think that part of it was the thing I'm probably most proud of. Just a lot of fun lighting that, and even though we didn't have actors, we had the actual people that are part of the story. After we shoot the interview, we'd shoot B-roll with them, kind of recreating those scenes, like what was it like to get that phone call, and then having those two people together and kind of reenact like how it happened. It was a lot of fun, just kind of setting that up and lighting in. And so that was great. And I had a whole concoction of things that I used to help it feel like a flashback. One Hollywood black magic filter paired with a quarter black pro mist, so they're sandwiched together. Plus we had Vaseline on parts of the lenses to help create some more blurring on there and focus the viewer's attention where we want it to be. I also had glass shards that I would arm in front of the lenses in different places to help create some interesting aberrations to the lenses. So depending on what the storyline was and who we were filming, I used those different elements. And so I think being able to pair that with the recreations and really help tell that story was a lot of fun. A really great thing about the lenses are just, like when you're out shooting in the natural environment, especially being at the right time of day. Blue hour is my favorite time of day. So we really in Malaysia were like, let's go out as much as we can at blue hour in the evening, and let's capture just city life and what people are doing. And so we'd roam around the market or random streets, just filming just this B-roll verite stuff, which was a lot of fun. And we captured some beautiful images, and the lens flares we got from the silver lenses were gorgeous. And just having that blue hour sky just to help still fill your image with depth, it felt really amazing. So there's some of those images in there. And then also really just walking through these spaces and meeting people and asking if we can film them, and just finding the light, which was a lot of fun. And
then adding the movement on top of that.
Yeah.
The story we're telling, and I think the people that always get lost in the story and the other retellings of it are the victims of the crimes. So in a financial crime and financial scandal, I think it's easy to lose sight of who the victims are. And it's the Malaysian people. Like, they're the ones who are paying for this. There's an $11 billion debt obligation for Malaysia, and the people of Malaysia are actually paying more taxes and seeing less investment in infrastructure because of it. So I think it was a stated objective of ours to make sure we spent time just talking to regular people. There's a land of huge juxtaposition between the rich and the poor, and the inequality gap is just, I don't know, it was just very dramatic to me and just very affecting, and it was something I just wanted to make sure we got across in the film. And some of these sequences that Joe shot, like especially just in the nitty gritty of it, I think do so much to kind of tell that story visually. So this is from our first shoot in London, and the bulk of the location scouting happened remotely. I have a good friend and former colleague who has a production company in London, so he did a lot of the in-person scouting for us and sent us a lot of options that Joe and I evaluated. And this place just had a lot of width, and I think we could turn it around so we could at least definitely get like 3 to 4 setups out of it, and just a very interesting character to the walls and the location. And like those light bulbs, definitely love those.
This is one of those wide shots of the interview, and it was like, how do we, make it feel like we're not in London, So this is more supposed to be like we're in Malaysia or Thailand or somewhere. So it has like that feel of like this old, just like building walls. Like anything, when I'm scouting a place, I'm looking at what the sun angle will be. What's the path of the sun? Are we gonna have sun coming through the windows at a certain time of day that we need to avoid? Because obviously an interview that's gonna be hours long, it needs to look consistent all the way through. But this, I love lighting in general. Like lighting is one of my favorite things. And for this specific shot, and most of them, it was like, how do we create a really soft source to wrap the face? For these interviews, we were using a 12 by of magic cloth. This was a specific book light setup we had for the interview. So we had I believe it was an M18 bouncing into an ultra bounce, and then it was coming through that magic cloth. And kind of just coming across his face. And then we had a sky panel just upstage from him to give us a nice 3/4 kind of backlight hitting the side of his face. So it felt like that was coming from the windows, so motivating from the windows for that to be a little harder. And then a lot of negative on the shadow side, just to help create that contrast with just a little bit of a cheek edge coming in with a Titan tube. So there's a miniature shot, and then we pull out to reveal kind of that it's fake. So then you can see like the full setup here. What was really, what's fun about miniatures in general is like it's a lot of work to light them. It's a different type of lighting because you have to use smaller sources, very controlled point sources to replicate the light. And this specifically was a nightclub. And we had
a replica of the Marquee nightclub in New York City. I'd always wanted to use miniatures, but more in like a narrative context. But when we got this project, I was like, screw it, let's just throw everything at the wall. But I wanted to make sure whoever did this was very skilled. And I was able to reach out to this gentleman, Ian Hunter, who is an Oscar winner for Interstellar and First Man. So working with him, the two of us, we had a series of conversations with him and his team where we recreated 4 environments that we thought we wouldn't be able to access for a number of reasons. One of them being the Marquee nightclub, where so many of these party scenes took place with Jho Low and the various celebrities he hung out with. So he made these like 1/12 scale miniature sets, and then we shot it up in Frogtown, against the psych stage. And yeah, like Joe said, the lighting of it was so much fun. We had guys who were specializing in like tabletop stuff, so they had all those like little cool lights that we could throw in. The nightclub especially, I think, having those like pulsating like lights hidden everywhere in the nooks and crannies of the set.
Yeah, it's you'll see like as a shot pulls out, you can see the jungle of stands that we had built to light this. It's a whole mix of a whole dado light kit with projector mount. We're spotlighting. We had the RGB version, so they're like flashing lights, so it feels like there's like disco lights happening. We have little aperture MC lights hidden up in the wings that are also flashing in the back. The designers, these also built in some practicals into the sets, like these little like bulbs that are just on behind the bar itself. I found this weird LED flashlight that creates a ray of, it feels like it's like a ray of lights coming out of it. And it's really tiny, so we're just like trying to figure out how do we create light streams in a miniature environment, because almost every big light you're gonna use, it's not gonna feel, the beams will be too big. So I brought this light that I bought on Amazon. It's like a purple light, and it's creating this like perfect like haze of beams coming through the environment, which is pretty incredible.
It's fragmenting.
It's like it's a laser light is what it was, but it makes like a fragmented effect. So we had that. We had like a little mini disco ball that we're hitting another dado into that disco ball that's then spraying across the entire set. But there's just so many different elements in here to create this one small scene. There's probably 10 to 15 lights. There's one more interview up here. This is what we shot. This is in Malaysia.
My favorite one.
We're in a restaurant. But all of our interviews are pretty much just like the same philosophy with the way that it was lit. It's like, okay, we'll have a soft wrap. We'll have a harder side key. And then a lot of negative fill. and then, whatever kind of backlight we need to do that. And so for this particular location, it was pretty difficult to find the right angle because there's a lot of pillars and plants and all kind of things were obstructing his head.
A little altar over there on the left side.
Yeah, but we found a great angle. We actually had to push our key light through 2 pillars 15 feet away because I have a whole, some kind of furniture. It's a whole thing. So anyway, so we're pushing light from pretty far away for our key light. But it worked really well. And then there was this blue, weird, I don't know what it was, very blue cyan box on the wall that was lit up. And I was like, this is a perfect way that we can use this to push that color light on his face as a cheek edge. And so we matched that color with Titan tube, and it looks really cool. So you can see the light in the background, so that's what it should be coming from.
I mean, aside from the setup, it was just an adjunct building to this restaurant that's active while we're filming, and in the middle of the interview, this torrential downpour started. And I'm actually really impressed at the audio work that TBD did to get that rain out, because I remember one of the lights got knocked down outside too, right?
Well, we had originally it was sunny outside, and the light was coming through the back windows, so we had a whole setup for sun. The windows we had diffusion all on the back windows to knock down the exposure on the sun coming through. So we started shooting, it's sunny. We also had a light outside in HMI pushing through the back, giving us a rake on the back wall. Halfway through the interview, it starts pouring rain. And it goes you just see it go completely dark. And our background that had the diffusion was turning black. And so we had to pause really quickly, send the Genie team out to rip off all the diffusion on the windows so that it would open them back up. And we had to bring the HMI inside so it wasn't getting rained on. So it's a whole scramble for 10 minutes to get that cleaned up. And then we start the interview over, not all the way at the beginning, but we started over again with this a little bit different look. But I mean, in the film, you can't
tell at all.
It's not cut together in that way.
Man on the Run will be on Netflix worldwide as of January 5th, 2024. So pick up your remote, your laptop, whatever. Take a watch.
And turn off smooth motion.
Yes. Oh my God, please do that. For both of our sakes.
I'm with you on that. I hate motion sensing.